All right, now let's look at this midterm review. Number 1, it says determine the domain and range of the function 15 cosine x, or cosine squared x. Now we haven't seen many cosine squared yet, or sine squares, what that does to the graph or how you type that in. In the calculator, here's what it's going to look like. We're going to type this in as f1 of x is going to equal 15 times, but instead of just doing cosine, the calculator, we have to do it as cos x, and the calculator is going to have a little parenthesis right here, so I don't want you to be confused by that. And so to be cos x, we close the parentheses of the calculator, throw it in, and then we're going to have to close the parenthesis around cosine and square that. That's how we'll type that in the calculator. So go over here, my calculator, and I'm going to look at the equation here. It actually was, not that, but 15, and then cosine squared x. Now, again, the way we're going to have to do this is we're going to put the squared on the outside. Okay, now I want to put the squared here. Now to subdivide it in the calculator, the way I wrote it out over there is I put a parenthesis here. You could also do it times, anything like that. But if you write it like this should give us our value. Now here's our picture, and I'm going to zoom out real quick so we can see how high, how low for our range. The domain is simple. It's talking about how far left, how far right. As you can see, it travels forever both ways. But as far as the lowest and highest point, the lowest it looks like is 0. The highest, let's analyze our graph and see where is the maximum. The maximum is, this is a y value of 15. Now why does that make sense? Because normal cosine graph, let me just type in a normal cosine. I'm sorry about the calculator doing that. Normal cosine's graph fluctuates between -1 and 1. Here's a picture. You see how that goes as low as -1 and up as high as +1? Well, if you multiplied that by 15, that would take it down to -15 and as high as +15. But before we multiply by 15, we actually have to square it. So squaring a -1 would give you +1. So really what happens is all these negative portions of the graph get flipped up and they're made positive. Let me show you. I'm going to take my graph and watch it change here. When I take my second equation, what you're going to see is this second equation, when I square it, all the negative values are going to come up and be positive. So this part should flip right there. I press enter. You see how it just flipped them? And that's because we just squared all the values. So now it's between 0 and 1. If I multiplied it by 15, that would make it between 0 and 15. So that's how you do these. That's why it kind of makes sense. So if the lowest value, let me do an order here. The domain, if you wanted to find the domain, you'd say how far left to right, and we said it goes forever left and right, so x is an element of all reals. Remember, you could write this as -infinity to +infinity. The range is the lowest to highest. What was the lowest point? The lowest point was 0. The highest point was 15. We could write it in that way, or we could say 0 is less than or equal to y, which is less than or equal to 15. That's the two ways of writing your answer.